Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work as a DJ at a small nightclub just outside the South Brisbane area in Australia. Before that, I was a delivery person for Domino's Pizza for about 3 years. That job had its ups and downs, but nothing prepared me for the entitled woman I met during that time. After losing my job during the pandemic, I was unemployed for a whole year. Getting back to DJing was such a relief. I love creating the perfect atmosphere for people to have a good time. That night 2 weeks ago started like any other. The club was packed with people dancing, drinking, and enjoying themselves with friends. The vibe was electric, and I was in my element behind the decks. Then I spotted her. In the corner of my eye, I noticed a large woman who looked to be in her late 30s or early 40s. Something about her seemed familiar, but I couldn't place her at first. When she turned around and I saw her face clearly, my stomach dropped. It was the same anti-vaccination woman who had insulted me for being on the autism spectrum during a delivery 2 years earlier. For a split second, I thought about getting some revenge, but that's not who I am. I decided to let bygones be bygones and focused on keeping the crowd happy instead of pursuing my own selfish goals. About an hour or two later, I noticed something concerning happening in the corner of the club. We have this bouncer, let's call him Stale Marshmallow. He's this 6'4" Aboriginal man built like a tank who looks intimidating, but is actually incredibly kind and gentle, hard on the outside, soft on the inside, hence the nickname he proudly embraces. Stale Marshmallow was standing in the corner, looking uncomfortable as the same woman I'd spotted earlier was trying to grope him and kiss him. Now, Stale Marshmallow is a husband and father of 4 who holds traditional beliefs about marriage. He believes in absolute faithfulness to his wife, which we all respect. The problem was that Stale Marshmallow isn't confrontational with women in the club and usually relies on other bouncers to handle such situations. Unfortunately, no other bouncer had noticed what was happening, so I was his only hope. According to club policy, DJs can stop the music if they witness any misconduct or potentially dangerous situations. I stopped the music, which naturally disappointed everyone. I grabbed the microphone and politely asked the woman to stop groping our bouncer in the corner. When she realized I was talking to her, she screamed back with an angry insult, telling me to get lost but using a much ruder word. The crowd turned against her, shouting threats and verbal abuse until she finally backed off. Stale Marshmallow came up later to thank me for the intervention. You might think that's where the story ends, but if it did, I wouldn't be sharing this. About an hour later, everything had returned to normal. People were dancing and having fun again. When I was mixing tracks, I noticed the woman standing motionless in the crowd. Not dancing, just staring at me with a glass of whiskey in her hand. The next thing I knew, she threw her glass directly at me, hitting me right in the eye. Thankfully, my eye is fine because part of my stage outfit includes LED goggles and a mask, which protected me, but it still hurt terribly. I immediately stopped the music and everyone turned to see me in pain. At least I think they did. My eyes were closed from the impact. Stale Marshmallow and 2 co-workers, one of our bartenders, and another bouncer who happens to be the owner's son-in-law, rushed to help me. The bouncer had seen what happened and yelled out, demanding to know who had thrown the glass. The room went silent as people started looking around. I told him to check the security cameras and call the police, confirming I had seen who threw the glass. The bartender ran to get a first aid kit since I was bleeding. The glass had shattered against my goggles and cut my forehead. Stale Marshmallow had the exits closed, so no one could leave. Despite the bartender's concerns, I stood up, grabbed the microphone, and talked to the crowd. I asked the crowd who would throw a glass at a DJ and then told them I had seen exactly who did it. Some guys in the crowd cheered me on as I scanned the room for the woman. When I spotted her, I pointed directly at her. I told everyone that she was the one who threw the glass and that this wasn't our first meeting. I explained that I used to work at Domino's Pizza and had once delivered to this woman who had abused me for having Asperger's syndrome and being autistic. The room turned on her with people cursing her out. At first, she looked confused. I reminded her of my first words to her, how I had politely said sorry for not making eye contact due to my Asperger's syndrome. Her face turned pale white as she finally remembered me. I told her that insulting someone with a disability wasn't right and that I never got to stand up for myself back then. But now I finally could tell her exactly what I thought of her behavior. I then turned around and sat back down. The room turned against her, and when she tried to run for the door, Stale Marshmallow and another bouncer stopped her. The police came, reviewed the security footage, and confirmed she was the culprit. I pressed charges and we have a court date next week. She's being charged with aggravated assault, damage to private property, and attempted manslaughter. You see, the security footage showed something even more disturbing. Somehow she had sneaked backstage and poured alcohol all over a power plug connected to the speakers and my equipment. This could have started an electrical fire and killed me and others. We still don't know how she did it, but the owner is also suing her for that. But it doesn't end there. It turns out someone from her family was at the nightclub that night and recorded me calling her out. This family member later contacted me and shared two interesting facts. First, after showing the recording to their entire family, almost everyone decided to cut contact with the woman. Second, she's a married woman with an 18-year-old daughter. She was at the nightclub with her husband's co-worker, as she had been sleeping with him and multiple other men. Now she's facing a divorce and 2 lawsuits. I guess it's true what they say, karma's a witch. I used to be a chiropractor before my life changed, involving a garbage truck and a long recovery. But that's another story. Back then, I sublet office space from an established doctor who I'll just call the doctor. When I first started working there, he seemed friendly and professional, but it didn't take long to see behind the mask. The doctor was a textbook narcissist with control issues that would make a dictator blush. He kept a caring, mentor-like persona with patients, but behind closed doors, he was a different person, manipulative, domineering, and cruel. I ended up in this situation because the location was perfect, the rent was reasonable, and as a new chiropractor, I needed to build my client base without the overhead of my own office. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. I have my own treatment room, access to the reception area and staff, and patient referrals. The doctor pitched it as a mentorship opportunity. I was fresh out of chiropractic college and eager to start my career, so I jumped at the chance. Within the first month, I realized my mistake. The doctor monitored everything I did, how I arranged my treatment room, which techniques I used, even how long I spent with patients. He'd give suggestions that were commands. If I didn't implement his ideas exactly as he wanted, he'd become passive-aggressive or hostile. There were 2 things about the doctor that stood out beyond his controlling nature. First, he had an unhealthy obsession with the Holocaust. He collected graphic historical books on the subject and would read them repeatedly. While he was smart enough not to bring this up with patients, I had to listen to his lengthy rants about German atrocities almost daily. Often he would describe disturbing details about concentration camps, and when I suggested that these weren't appropriate topics before seeing patients, he would insist people needed to remember such things. He would declare that the German government was evil then and remained evil now, complaining that nobody talked about it enough. His second obsession was street racing. He owned multiple Porsches that he'd raced through dangerous mountain roads. These weren't casual Sunday drives. He regularly pushed 100+ miles per hour on narrow, winding roads where even 45 miles per hour could be risky. People died on those roads all the time, mostly cyclists and motorcyclists who had the bad luck of sharing the road with reckless drivers like him. He would boast about taking his new 911 Turbo up to Bear Ridge and hitting 110 miles per hour on a dangerous S-curve by a lookout point. When I mentioned that a cyclist had been killed there just the previous month, he dismissed it by saying it was their fault for being on such a road, adding that quick reflexes were needed up there. He'd brag about these driving adventures constantly, oblivious to the contradiction between his outrage over historical atrocities and his disregard for human life on the road. For months, I put up with his behavior while looking for another office space. The final straw came during a professional development conference for chiropractors. I was seated at a table with a doctor, his wife, also a chiropractor, and several colleagues from the area. As usual, the doctor dominated the conversation. No matter what topic came up, he somehow steered it back to his favorite subjects. Eventually, he launched into another Holocaust rant, connecting it to modern Germany. He went on about how the German government today was just as evil as during the Holocaust, claiming nothing had changed and they just hid it better now. He looked around the table, seeking agreement from our uncomfortable colleagues. Then he asked what anyone could do about such a situation. This was my moment. I looked him directly in the eyes, and with a neutral expression, I suggested that he could start by not buying any more of their cars. His wife burst out laughing. She laughed so hard I thought she might fall out of her chair. Several other people at the table snickered or covered their mouths, trying not to laugh openly. The doctor's face turned red. His mouth opened and closed repeatedly like a fish out of water. He tried to speak but could only make a strange choking sound. For nearly a minute he sat there, unable to form words, probably the longest he'd been silent since I'd known him. After that incident, he stopped talking to me about both the Holocaust and his Porsches. Our professional relationship became strictly business, cold but quiet. He avoided being alone with me and kept conversations brief. 2 months later, I found my own office space and gave my notice. On my last day, as I was packing up my equipment, his wife stopped by when he wasn't around. She thanked me for my comment at the conference, saying it was perfect. She told me that in 20 years of marriage, she had never seen him speechless before, and added that he still got angry whenever she brought it up. I moved on to build my own practice, and while the doctor continued his controlling ways with new subtenants, I heard that his wife referenced German cars whenever he started to rant. I've been dating my girlfriend for almost 2 years now, and she's amazing, smart, kind, and incredibly strong despite everything she's been through. But there's one thing that constantly breaks my heart: the way her grandmother treats her. My girlfriend's grandmother has 2 children, my girlfriend's mother and her uncle. From day one, it was clear that the grandmother had a favorite. She dotes on her son and his children while treating my girlfriend and her mother like second-class family members. The favoritism is so obvious that even strangers notice it at family gatherings. What bothers my girlfriend the most is how her grandmother takes her food or drinks without asking and gives them to her cousin, the favorite grandchild. My girlfriend often buys her own food with money she's earned from her part-time job or her mother pays for it. But that doesn't stop her grandmother from helping herself and giving it away, leaving my girlfriend with nothing. Last month, my girlfriend worked hard for her final exams. She stayed up late studying, made flashcards, and gave up hanging out with friends to make sure she got good grades. Her mother promised that if she did well, she would take a day off work and they would go to her favorite restaurant that serves the best schnitzel in town. This was a big deal because her mother rarely gets time off, and my girlfriend was excited about their special day together. When the results came in, my girlfriend aced all her exams. Her mother kept her promise and scheduled a day off. They made reservations at the restaurant, and my girlfriend was counting down the days. The morning of their special day, my girlfriend was getting ready when her mother received a phone call. I could tell something was wrong from the look on her face. I asked her mother what was wrong. She told me that her grandmother had called and heard about their plans. The grandmother had decided she wanted to join them to celebrate her cousin's good grades too. My girlfriend was upset. This was supposed to be her special day with her mom, not another family gathering where she'd be overlooked in favor of her cousin. My girlfriend begged her mother to tell her grandmother no, explaining that this was supposed to be just the 2 of them. Her mother said she had tried, but the grandmother was already on her way to the restaurant with her cousin. When we arrived at the restaurant, the grandmother and cousin were waiting outside. My girlfriend took a deep breath and decided to talk to her grandmother directly. My girlfriend told her grandmother that while she was happy to see her, she and her mother had been planning to have a special lunch, just the 2 of them today. The grandmother accused my girlfriend of being selfish, insisting that families celebrate together. She added that the cousin had also gotten good grades and they wanted to celebrate together. They argued for a few minutes, but my girlfriend gave up. She didn't want to make a scene and her grandmother had already made up her mind. The hostess seated them with the grandmother and cousin at a nearby table. The food arrived and my girlfriend looked at her favorite schnitzel. It was a massive portion, golden and crispy, served with potato salad and fresh lemon. She hadn't even taken her first bite when her grandmother appeared at their table. The grandmother said the food looked delicious and wanted to try some. Before my girlfriend could respond, her grandmother grabbed a knife from the table and cut off a huge chunk of the schnitzel, almost a third of it, and put it on a small plate she'd brought over. My girlfriend asked her grandmother what she was doing and pointed out that she hadn't even asked permission. The grandmother dismissed her concerns, telling her not to be stingy and saying she was just taking a little bit for her cousin to try. That was the final straw. Years of having her boundaries crossed, her feelings ignored, and her belongings taken without permission came rushing to the surface. My girlfriend stood up. My girlfriend shouted that her grandmother always does this, always takes what's hers without asking and gives it to her cousin. She said this was her special day with her mom to celebrate her grades, and her grandmother had ruined it. She grabbed her plate and slammed it down on her grandmother's table, sending food flying everywhere. Some of it landed on her grandmother's blouse and some on her cousin's lap. The grandmother was upset, asking how my girlfriend dared to do such a thing and complaining about her ruined clothes. The restaurant manager walked over. He asked what was going on. My girlfriend explained how her grandmother had taken her food without permission and ruined their special celebration. Other diners nearby spoke up, confirming they had seen the grandmother cutting off a large portion of my girlfriend's meal without asking. The manager told the grandmother that she would have to pay for the damage to the restaurant's property, as well as for her own meal and her granddaughter's. He said in his restaurant, they respect others and their property. The grandmother protested, saying the situation was outrageous and pointing out that my girlfriend was the one who threw the food. The manager said she had taken the food without permission. The grandmother paid for everything. She left with her granddaughter looking angrily at my girlfriend as she left. The manager brought my girlfriend a fresh schnitzel on the house, and she and her mother enjoyed the rest of their meal in peace. But the damage was done. The special day had been spoiled by the confrontation. For over a week, my girlfriend's mother didn't speak to the grandmother. The grandmother didn't apologize, instead telling other family members that my girlfriend had embarrassed her in public and was disrespectful. It's been a month since the incident, and things are still tense. My girlfriend is trying to find a way to make up with her grandmother, but it's difficult when the grandmother refuses to admit that she did anything wrong. The favoritism continues, though now the grandmother is more careful about taking things without asking. Despite all of this, my girlfriend stays positive. She doesn't let her grandmother's behavior bring her down. She focuses on her relationship with her mother, who has become more protective of their time together, and on her friends and other family members who treat her with respect and love. She continues to do well in school, pursue her hobbies like reading and hiking, and look forward to a future where she can set her own boundaries. She's learned from her mother's mistakes and plans to never play favorites if she has children of her own. I've been in the family plumbing business for nearly 2 decades. We handle anywhere from 200 to 400 homes yearly, both subdivisions and custom builds, plus commercial work and hydronic systems. My job keeps me mostly office-bound, purchasing materials, scheduling crews, dealing with customers, writing up quotes and contracts. I visit job sites sometimes, but I'm mainly the behind-the-scenes guy making sure everything runs smoothly. In this business, you learn to spot the troublemakers from far away. When this custom home builder started showing all the red flags, I wasn't surprised. He changed schedules at the last minute, tried to get free upgrades, was disorganized with his paperwork, and seemed like he'd throw you under the bus to save a few bucks. We'd completed the rough-in drainage work and water pipe installation for one of his projects when things went quiet. He ghosted me for over 6 months while still owing our company about $1,500. I had written it off as loss when he suddenly called out of the blue. The builder called asking if we could finish the job we had started months ago. When I mentioned the $1,500 he still owed us, he said it was the same job. He needed the tubs installed and the rough-in inspection passed. This guy had already proven himself untrustworthy. I told him I would only complete the work after being paid in full for what he already owed. I made it clear that my workers would need payment before they started any work. He responded with vague, yeah and sounds. I told him he needed to have cash or a certified check when my team arrived. The full $1,500 before we would do anything. Again, he just gave another His vague responses worried me. 20 years in this business teaches you about people trying to dodge payments. He was agreeing without actually committing. Since I'd written off the $1,500 as a loss, I realized I had some leverage. I still owed him 3 bathtubs that totaled over $2,500 before taxes, not including our labor to install them. I called my supplier to check if I could return the tubs without a restocking fee, explaining my concerns about this builder not paying. The supplier told me that as long as the tubs stayed in their original packaging, returning them wouldn't be a problem since those models sold regularly. I ordered the tubs and called the builder back to schedule the work for later that week. I reminded him that my team wouldn't start until we received the $1,500 he owed us. He responded with another, I told him I needed cash or a certified check ready when my workers arrived on site. He just muttered a The day of the job arrives. My workers got to the site just before 8 a.m. but the place was locked with nobody around. I called the builder, who told me his wife would be there in 15 minutes to let my workers in. When I reminded him about our payment, he just gave me another I lined up another job nearby just in case. The builder's wife showed up an hour later with no payment, no cash, no check, not even an apology for making my workers wait an hour. I told my crew to pack up and go to the other job site. Then I called the builder. I asked why he didn't have the payment ready, as we agreed. He started making excuses, saying the amount was too much and he didn't want to pay for work we hadn't done yet. I told him we had settled these terms days ago and that the time for negotiation had passed, especially when my workers were already on site. He said he wasn't going to pay the amount we agreed on. I told him to lose my number and called him a jerk before hanging up. I called my supplier and scheduled the tubs for pickup. Whatever he was thinking, that I was naive, desperate for work, or just stupid, his greed cost him well over $1,000 in materials, plus all the labor costs to finish the job. In business, your word is your bond. If you break it, don't be surprised when you end up with no bathtubs and a half-finished house. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.